Hi, everyone. This is Aaron. Today is Wednesday, August 22nd, 2018. I'm recording from my home studio, and you are listening to the SoundWords podcast. I'm making several new changes to the podcast. The first is that I'm going to be very focused on making this a podcast about worship leading. The second is that it's going to go back to a free-flowing conversation with very little editing. And the third thing is that I'm going to have a guest on the show. My first guest is my best friend, Warren Tang. We recorded this conversation about a week ago, and we're going to talk about the different worship styles that we've seen, the importance of perspective, and the joys and challenges of leading worship with your spouse. Thanks for listening. Warren, you're leading at First Baptist Church, Pasadena now. Tell me how it's been going.
It's been going really well. I think for Leslie and I, Leslie, who is my wife of 5 years, we started out leading worship together at your church, FCBC Walnut. And then after that, we were leading worship at smaller congregations, Cross Life, a church called Valley Center in Covina, then a church in Cerritos called CMC. And those are all like congregation sizes of between maybe like 20 to maybe like 50 if it was like a good Sunday. So now we're at a church that averages between 150 to 200 on Sundays. We also have like professional paid musicians that we play with. So it's been an adjustment because Leslie and I have never worked with professional musicians before on a regular basis. It's also a bigger service. So there's just, it's a bigger production. And so it's more involved. On the weeks that we're leading, it definitely takes up more time, more effort. So it's been an adjustment, but overall, we're really happy. We love the church. We love the people. We're playing with amazing musicians who can practically play any genre, any style. They challenge us, we challenge them. And so, yeah, really happy.
I know that I've known that you've gone to different churches, right? And so is it hard to adjust from one church to another church, or for you guys, is it just easy?
Yeah, honestly, it's been really weird because, man, I was at FCBC Walnut from like fourth grade all the way up until like my 20s. So I was used to just being at one church. And then it was like Cross Life, Valley Center, PASNAS, CMC, now FBC. And so these past like 5 years of my life, I've been doing all these transitions where it's just like I spend a couple of months at this church, then I spend a couple of months at this church. And it's, I don't know, it's weird. One way I look at it, it's like it's really cool because I see it as like real ministry. It's like these are churches that need help. Their worship leader had either just left or, the church was going through some drama and they needed Leslie and I to come in and bring stability to the worship ministry. And it was a real honor. And we saw it as like real ministry that we loved, and it was purposeful and it was effective. But at the same time, like for Leslie, it was kind of driving her crazy where she just wanted to be in a single church that she could call home, tie down roots, get involved with the church, make community, and not be constantly thinking about what's the next move, what's the next transition we're going to be in. Are we going to have to like meet all these new people again, get to know the staff again, learn how they do things, and then move on to another place. So I would say the fact that we're in that this church has hired us and we're there hopefully for a long time. I really hope they keep us for a long time. I know Leslie is a lot happier. And I think for me, it does provide more stability, more peace, just knowing that you're going to be at a single place for a longer time.
Yeah, the funny thing is that all the churches that you've kind of went to, they've been kind of local. They've been close to you. I think there's only one that was far. Maybe the one that was in Cerritos, I think, was it? Cerritos or Torrance? Remember that one?
Yeah, Cerritos.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a beast because we'd get there on Saturdays for rehearsal. And then we'd have to go back on Sundays. And if there was traffic, it would take us an hour and a half to get there, and then an hour and a half to get back. So I was always wiped out by like Sunday evening.
Yeah, no, I think the good thing though is that like yeah, for these other churches, like they've been close by to you, so it's not as if you've really had to travel far from like your home base. Like you didn't have to like get up and move like your
Right.
house just to work at another church, you know? I think that's
Yeah.
really a good blessing.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't think Leslie and I are we're not like superstar like worship leaders. Like we're not good enough
Well, I think
that
you guys
somebody would
are.
like move. They wouldn't like move. No church would like pay for like our moving expenses to like move us to another area to do worship at their church. Like I think pretty much it's only like these local churches that need help for a season, and so that and then they come calling us, you
Well,
know.
you're
But
underselling yourself a little bit, man. I would pay to have you guys come over if I ever had a church. You know, the other thing too is that like you notice that like there's so many churches out there that need musical help, you know? Like
yeah,
at FCBC, I feel that like okay, yeah, there's a lot of good help here, you know, everybody can play an instrument, but then you know, you go to other churches and you know, they don't have anybody that can play,
man,
you know? And you have
so
churches that need to, you know, like hire professional musicians because nobody else
yes.
can play any music, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Your home church FCBC is so rare because you guys have like 7 or 8 worship leaders that could all lead the service. And then you have this humongous base of musicians, drummers, bass, guitar players. I don't know how many piano player, violin players you guys have. It's nuts. Like out of all the churches that Leslie and I have served at, we've never run into that. Um, and it's always been a challenge. Like Leslie and I have gone to like APU, Life Pacific, Fuller. Like we've put up like posters on the wall, like saying like, hey, you know, if you're looking to serve at a church, like looking to do worship, like give us a call. And it's like all the talented musicians, because it's more normal for churches to pay musicians now. Most of the good musicians are, you know, they're paid, they're at churches already. Churches aren't letting them go. And so yeah, it is really rare. And I think one other thing I'll say is that in a lot of the contexts that Leslie and I were leading worship in, um, you know, if we were doing a service of like 15 people, I didn't always feel like it was necessary to have a full worship team, you know, like drums, bass, 2 guitars, like 4 vocalists. You know, I just kind of felt like if it was a more intimate service with like 15, 20 people, that we could strip it back and strip it down. But sometimes, you know, the pastors that we were serving under didn't always feel that way. They were like, they didn't care how many people were there. You know, they were chasing Hillsong. Like, hey man, I want the full Hillsong experience. Give me, you know, the big band concert style sound. And I don't know. I think that's something where it's like, you know, your theology of worship. It's yeah, I know. I think that's something that I've been wrestling with and thinking about a lot because, you know, is it really about chasing Hillsong? And it's like, and do I need to sound like Hillsong and have like that concert style worship, or you know, can I strip it down? What is most pleasing to God? What's going to make the most sense for my congregation? What's going to help my congregation interact and have these intimate worship times with God? What's going to help them, yeah, connect with God? So it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Those are the questions that I've been wrestling with lately.
No, and those are good questions to ask, man. You know, okay, so
Yeah.
you knew that during the summer I was like, you know, I did like some retreats for some other churches, you know, and every
Yeah.
church has like, you know, a different like way of doing musical worship, you know, and they have different team setups. But, you know, for retreats and stuff, they're okay with a small setup, you know. And so like for
Yeah.
me, I'm kind of like, yeah, like sometimes on Sundays, like you don't need to always go full team, you know. I think
Right.
it's definitely, you know, something that pastors should be talking to the music leaders
Yeah.
about, and it's something that music leaders should be asking themselves too. Like what are we striving for here exactly, you know?
Absolutely. I think a huge part of it is that like consumer driven approach to church, right? Like a lot of pastors are thinking about church from this perspective. Like there's somebody walking off the street that's going to visit my church today. And if I don't put forth a product that's better or just as good as the church down the street from me, that person is not going to come back. The church down the street from me might have smoke machines, fog machines. They're playing that Bethel Hillsong elevation worship style, and it's like, I got to do that, I got to be that, or these people are not going to come back. And it's the same thing for people that are visiting churches. It's like they come into a church and the first thing they're thinking about is this my style of worship? Like, I didn't come here to sing no hymns. Like, I came here to hear a band where I could, like, I want some electronic synth, like I want some jumping up and down. And I think for me, it's like, I love all of that. I love elevation worship. I love Bethel. I love Hillsong. I love hymns. And it's just kind of like, I think it's all good. I just think you just have to, check your heart. You got to, like, am I looking at this from a consumeristic like perspective point of view, or like, am I looking at it from the perspective of like, I'm taking a survey of my congregation and the demographics, and I'm doing what I think is going to help them connect with God. And it might be, smoke machine and fog machines. I think it's different for every context, kind of like what you were talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, okay. Like I remember you checked out Mosaic a couple times, right? When you guys were still like in between, I guess.
Yeah.
And I know that that's totally different than what you guys, what you guys are currently doing now, right? Like
totally.
At Mosaic, it's very produced. They have like what you're talking about with the lights and stuff. But I remember you told me that you guys loved it. Like you guys felt like this is great, And I think I think it's good because you and Les, like, you're not confined. You're not confined, and you guys are able to worship not only as leaders but just as participants in any in any atmosphere. And that's something that I need to work on, man. Because when I go, if I go somewhere and it's like the lights are dim and there's like lasers and stuff, I start wondering what's going on. But that's my own fault. That's my own fault though. Like I admit, I got to be more open minded in that stuff. And God does look at our hearts first. And so, good job to you and Les, man. You guys are my heroes, man. Not only musically, but theologically too, man. There's a lot of stuff I learned from you guys.
Yeah, but I think, to speak to your point, I think that you do walk a fine line. Like, if you are a church that is doing that big production stuff, like you do walk a fine line, like, just in terms of like, is this for God or are we like performing here? I will say this, like, I am a Mosaic homer. Like, I love Mosaic,
They're great, man. They're great.
I think a huge part of it is because, like, I had family members that were very like anti-church. And then when I took them to Mosaic, they were like, oh, wow, this is not what I thought church was at all. It's high energy. Like you said, the worship is very produced, but in a good way. Like, the quality is so high. And it's dark. You've got, a really nice like lights. The sermons are very relatable, I think, to anybody, to someone who's never been to church before, but also to someone who's been in church for 20 or 30 years. I really feel like they know what they're doing, and I really do feel like it's authentic, it's genuine, and they just have a heart to reach people who are lost. Specifically about the worship, like, I have had some very meaningful times of worship at Mosaic. I do like the lights and the smoke machines, the high energy, but I think it's also a lot of times the lyrics of the songs are about like how we are broken and how God has rescued us in our brokenness and how we're all in need of mercy and forgiveness, and how God like loves us even in our sinfulness. It's things like that have really like, brought me to tears, like when I've been in those like times of worship. It is like highly emotional, and I think for somebody who like maybe is more like intellectual with their faith, that might not resonate with them as much. I look at my current church and the demographics of my church, it leans a little bit older, so I've got, folks like 50 and up. There's not a large number of youth. There's not a large number of children. There's a decent number of young adults, but the young adults at my church are all like engineers, scientists. They're not like hipster kids who like, listen to a ton of Bethel and like elevation worship. So like, when I've thought about, should I bring that Mosaic style of worship to my church? Like I had talked to the lead pastor about it, and it was just kind of like I think we both agreed that it wasn't going to make sense. Like we're also in a sanctuary
It's a
that was built
beautiful
in the
sanctuary, man. Beautiful
Thank you, man.
sanctuary.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was built in the 1930s. You have like the original wooden pews. There's stained glass windows. We have this gigantic organ. So it's about as like old church as you can think. And so something that my pastor likes to say is that like the container that you're in, like the space that you're in, like shapes the worship. And so like even if I tried to bring a fog machine in there, it would just look so weird in this like sanctuary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like I mean I think we've agreed that like that style of worship doesn't fit the demographics of our church as well as like the sanctuary that we're in. And so we try, and because it's still relatively new. We just started in March. We're still learning our congregation. They're still getting to know us. We're still learning what is it that helps our congregation worship? How do we bring about meaningful times of worship? Is it hymns? Is it contemporary? So far it's been a blended experience. We do a lot of contemporary. We do a lot of hymns. Twice a month, we also have somebody that comes in and plays the organ. And so yeah, it's a journey. I just hope that they keep us long enough to help us figure it out.
Yeah, man. No, you have a lot of great points there, man. I mean, obviously, like with a church like yours, man, I honestly don't think you would even need like a smoke machine and lights and stuff, man. You go into your church, high ceiling, stained glass windows and stuff. You already feel like, oh shoot, this place is a holy place,
Yeah,
And then, I think that also you just talking to your pastor and just trying to hash it out, like what does he have in mind, and then what do you have
yeah,
in mind? I think that's great, man, that you guys are willing to hear each other out and even just talk it through. And then the other
yeah.
thing too, like you're totally aware of your demographics, man. I mean, yeah,
Mhm.
it would make no sense for you guys to go in there and just start playing like all this, you know, hipster music where the probably, the older ones might not be able to worship well to it, I mean, yeah,
Right,
you got to have the congregation in mind. You got to have the pastor in mind, the space in mind.
right.
Those are really great points, man. I know that you and Les have been leading together. And so
Mm.
this is what I did want to ask you originally, was that like, what I guess, okay, given the fact that like, yeah, you guys all, are on the same page on like what kind of songs you're gonna do like this blended style. I'm sure it's not always easy, man. So what are like some quick, difficulties and challenges working with your spouse?
Yeah.
But then also like, what are some great, benefits, I guess, or like joys or, happy things, good things that come out
Oh
of that?
yeah. Um, it is still a work in progress. I think doing anything with your spouse it's going to be one of the most amazing and joyful experiences, but it's also going to be one of the most, honestly, it's going to be one of the most challenging things that you're going to do. I mean, you and Jess ran a restaurant together. Okay, man, that is one of the most stressful, taxing, and you had no restaurant experience,
Right, yeah, one of the hardest things we've done in our life.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw. I mean, and I, like would visit the restaurant. Or you and I would hang out, and I would see, like how you guys had to figure things out together. And so, like for Leslie and I, it was really, really hard in the beginning. She was so used to being like the main person, choosing all the songs, writing all the arrangements, leading the rehearsal, making all the decisions, meeting with the pastor. And then so was I. I was used to doing all those things. So when we came together, we would butt heads so much in the beginning. Um, I don't know exactly what changed. I think a huge part of it was humility, and I think that goes for any worship leader, whether you're by yourself or whether you're working co-leading with another worship leader. It's like if you don't come in with that spirit of humility, like you are not going to be successful. Like worship leading is so rare and unique in the sense that you are not performing. it's weird, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
you're facing the congregation, everybody's looking at you, you're playing music and you're singing, but yet it's not a performance. Your goal is to draw their attention to God. And so if you come into it with like this arrogant, cocky attitude, like you are going to fail, you know? Um, and I think for Leslie and I, it was like I think we understood that if we were going to do this together, our attitudes had to shift, you know? There had to be just this um I don't know what the word, like I'm just thinking of like humility, like washing
Yeah.
over, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
washing
yeah.
attitudes. And then it was a lot of just trial and error. You know, like a lot of it logistically, it's like we would sit down and when we would think about the songs that we needed to pick, we would butt heads a lot and we would clash. And then over the years, we just started to understand each other better. Um, it was like, okay, well, I have a feeling Leslie's going to want to do this, or she'd be like, I have a feeling Warren's going to want to do this. Like maybe we can compromise by doing this and then doing this arrangement, you know? And so it was just time, you know, it was just time and just doing it. Kind of like with you and Jess in the restaurant. It was like, man, that first month I saw you, you were a mess, dude, because it was like you were still doing Unicoi, you were still working at the hospital,
Yeah,
you still had
yeah,
family obligations, you know,
yeah,
you guys just bought the condo, all this kind of stuff.
yeah.
And then it was just like, but then, you know, by the time you closed the restaurant and I saw you, you looked fine. It's like you were handling everything better because
Oh,
you guys
thanks,
got
man.
into rhythm, you
Thanks.
know, like we're figuring out how to work together. You were
Mm.
figuring out how to lighten each other's burdens. And that's pretty much, I think, you know, just time, trial and error that I think helped Leslie. The third thing I will say that's really difficult about leading worship with your spouse is giving each other constructive feedback. Like I was going to use the word criticism, but it's just
Mm.
like I think there are times when you have to separate. Like I am not talking to you as your husband. You are not talking to me as my wife. Like now I'm talking to you as like a co-worship leader. So
Mm.
if I tell you that something doesn't sound good or something needs to be played differently or we need to try something differently, it's like, you know, like we can't hurt each other's feelings where it's like, oh, this person is like attacking me, or it's like, oh, are you telling me that because I told you to do the dishes last night, you didn't do it because like, you know, I didn't fold laundry. It's like, you know, it's like, no, 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 like, no, 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 this is separate. You know what I mean? Like, we're not bringing our like, you know, I'm not talking to you as like, you know, Warren, your husband, or you're not talking to me as like Leslie, your wife. It's like the feedback that we're giving is because we want our worship team to be successful and to thrive, you know. So and that's still a work in progress. Like, you know, it's never easy to hear constructive feedback or criticism, but it's like, you know, I think Leslie and I are learning new language, like language of just more like edification and encouragement and yeah, but I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah,
And
that's great, man. That's really
yeah.
good. That's really good,
So
man.
I'm sorry. And then you also asked like, you know, what's like, you know, a positive thing about being
Yeah,
able to do worship with your wife. Like,
yeah.
um, man, I can say that like, um, it's amazing. You know what I mean? It's like no other feeling, dude. Because I think there are things in your life that you love and you're passionate about, and it's like you want your spouse, your significant other to understand that. And sometimes it's like you can explain it to them as much as you can, but like they're not going to feel it the same way that you feel it. But then but when you share the same passion and you do it together and you're able to spur one another on, like I don't know, man. It's like an unspeakable joy that like I can't describe, because it's just like I love Leslie with all my heart. Like before I met her, I was a mess, and God really used her to like help shape my life and like form me into like a man of God and just a better person. And it's just like I would not have gotten hired by this church if it wasn't for Leslie. Like she has made me the person I am today. And the fact that we get to share this and do this together, it's like we get to honor God together. We get to shepherd these people together. We get to lead these people into worship together. Like it's amazing. I'll tell you one story. One of the most powerful times of worship was a few months ago. We had this choir. they were called like the Walter Hoving Choir.
Okay.
Um, Walter Hoving is a house for women who have been domestically abused.
Oh
Um,
wow.
if you're interested in supporting them, check out their website, Walter Hoving, Hoving, Walter Hoving Home. It's amazing. Like they help these women get back on their feet. They provide them living. They provide them job training. And so they came down and they just shared these like really impactful testimonies. And then they shared a couple of songs. And then afterwards, Leslie and I came up and we did a time of worship. And we led the song No Longer Slaves.
Okay.
And I looked to my left and these women were just pouring out their heart and they were in tears and they were lifting their hands and they were just worshiping so powerfully. And I looked over at Leslie and like she was in tears and it was just like it was such a profound and holy moment and it was just such an honor to be able to lead worship in that moment. And I was just like, God, you are so amazing. Like the redemption and the freedom that comes from knowing you, how we can go through so much hurt and brokenness in our life and you can redeem all of that. And the fact that Leslie and I got to stand on that platform and do that together, we still talk about that moment. And it's just like, man, I got to share that with my wife, like
Yeah.
it was so powerful. And so I don't know, man, it's a blessing. It's a real blessing.
Man,
And
no,
I just, I,
that's great, man. Dude, thanks for sharing that, man. And you're right, dude. You can do stuff together with somebody, right? But when you do stuff together with God, for
yeah,
God's people, especially when it comes to worship, yeah, that's something really unique, man. Something that a
right.
lot of people don't get. So, man, keep doing it, man. I'm glad that you and Les are still learning and growing together. And yeah, man, thanks for doing this podcast too, man.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks for, I
Um,
don't know, man. You and I go way back,
yeah,
so
man. Well,
me and Aaron been best friends since like sixth grade,
yeah,
and
man. We'll
I don't
have
know,
to
it's just
do
fun. It's just fun to talk, man.
we'll do another episode where we dive into our history, man. But last
That's a
question,
10-part
man.
series.
Yeah, we'll do a mini documentary series. What are you currently listening to, man? It could be worship music, it could be rock music, pop music, freaking hip hop. It could be anything, man. What are you listening to these days?
Oh, for sure, dude. Oh man, so much stuff. Well, did I tell you that Leslie and I went to see Bon Iver at the Hollywood Bowl?
Oh no, I don't think you told me that, man. That's awesome.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
we actually
right.
went with our pastor and his wife.
Oh shoot. Okay.
Yeah, Bon Iver was playing with like this dance troupe, and so like they were doing like dance while he was playing in the back. It was so sick. It was
That's
just
awesome.
really good.
We
Like
need to do that.
I
We need to
love, yeah, right? No,
Yeah,
seriously, our
yeah, we need to.
music. In case you don't know, Earth to Jupiter, earthtojupiter.com. In case you don't know, like it's so dancey. Our stuff is so dancey. We need a dance troupe to make us famous. But yeah, I love how he combines like folk with indie with electronic, and then sometimes it's just straight up like emotional, like, and it can be, it kind of, some stuff maybe like a little pop. I don't know, not really, but yeah, I don't know. I love him. This group, I love Breakbot. I love Empire of the Sun. Been listening to some Roosevelt. This is gonna sound so weak, but I listen to Earth to Jupiter a lot.
You're why we have like 20 plays on Spotify.
Probably all our Spotify listens are just me.
It's all right, man. It's all right.
Yeah, and then in terms of worship, I do like the Mosaic stuff. MSC, the song "Tremble"
Great.
is really good. There was a guest worship leader at our church that introduced "Reckless Love" by Bethel, which I know is kind of like controversial because this. I was wondering if people at my church were going to like push back on that, but nobody said anything. So I started listening to that song because he introduced it. Yeah, there's a Hillsong "Who You Say I Am" that we just started playing at our church too. I love the theology of that song because it talks about, like, I am who you say I am. Like to me, it's just kind of like, I think in this like age that we live in, where it's like your self view can be wrecked a lot of times just by like social media or just whatever, family. And it's just like, no, but to remember that God says that you were made in his image. You are beautiful, like in your brokenness, like you can find him, it's just like he can redeem like, your past sins. It's just like if you're hurting, it's just like you are who you say he is, like, you are a child of God. Like, so I really like leading that song. And Yeah, I don't know, man. I always bump your stuff, Musicgoon. So always never failed to since day one, man. I've always
Oh
listened.
man. Hey, thanks for doing this, man. Thanks for doing this. Let's do it again sometime, okay?
For sure, bro. Love you, man. Thanks so much.
All right, love you, man. Thanks, Warren, for being my guest on the show, and thank you, everyone, for listening. This is season 3 of the SoundWords podcast, and I'm going for a more produced feel. So please send me your feedback or questions for follow up. You can even send me any questions specifically for Warren to follow up on, and I'll be sure to get to them in the next few episodes. In the show notes, you'll find links to our podcast archive. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. My website is musicgoon.com. The email address for this podcast is soundwords@musicgoon.com. And you can always tweet me at musicgoon. Thanks. See you soon.